All right, I'd like to call to order the Town of Ladysmith Committee of the Whole meeting for today, Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. First on the agenda is our call to order and acknowledgements. So Town of Ladysmith acknowledges with gratitude that this meeting takes place on the unceded territory of the Stamanis First Nation. Members of the public may attend meetings in person at the Ladysmith Senior Center or view the live stream on YouTube. And just a reminder, there is no question period tonight as it's committee of the whole. So next is agenda approval. And the recommendation is that the agenda for this meeting, November 18th, 2025, committee of the whole, be approved. Through to staff, is there any additions?
Yes, Chair Jacobson. A late agenda item was circulated to Council yesterday regarding Councillor Patterson's submission, item 6.1, RV housing for site security. Copies of this new item are available tonight at this meeting. It has also been posted on our website.
Thank you. Everyone on council has a copy of the late agenda item, I'm assuming, and to move the amended agenda with the late agenda item. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Stevens, Councillor Gourlay, all in favor? Agenda approved. Next is the minutes of our last committee of the whole meeting held September 9th, 2025. Recommendation is that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting be approved from September 9th. All in favor, or moved by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Mayor Beeston. All in favor? She passed. Okay, next up we have a presentation from staff, the status update on the waterfront remediation. So through to staff. Staff, would you like questions at the end or interrupt you?
At the end is fine, or in the middle, doesn't matter. So,
no question.
just like to point out that was a question at the start. So, so tonight I'll be giving a bit of an update, good news update on uplands remediation, which by extension will also be a bit of an update on the status of the waterfront area plan. So in the waterfront area plan, in this context, you can categorize the land into two types. You have the uplands, and this is everything sort of above the pre-contact high tide mark. It's owned by the town, and contamination comparatively is moderate. And the town started its remediation process of these lands in 2019. And then you have the water lots. These are parcels of land that sit below the pre-contact high tide line. And these are owned by the province, some of them being leased to Stamanis First Nation. It comprises the Oyster Bay Marina parcel, DL 2016, the boat launch parcels, as well as DL 651, the dog patch, and the small narrow sliver you see indicated with the arrow there, lot 17G. These are all part of the reconciliation agreement with Stamanis First Nation. And comparatively, these are heavily contaminated with coal byproducts from the coal washing operation that existed before the town took possession of any lands in the area. The province is generally responsible for cleanup of these lands, and to date they have not undertaken any extensive remediation efforts. However, they have recently started preparing an updated detailed site investigation with some drilling that's recently occurred on Slack Point. So sometimes you hear folks wondering why stuff isn't happening down on the waterfront, why things aren't being built in terms of the waterfront area plan. And the short answer to why that's not happening is we can't. When land is contaminated, when land has been used for a Schedule 2 use, everything you see on the left there essentially cannot occur. And virtually all of those things we need to do to execute the waterfront area plan. Subdivide, rezone, issue development permits, issue building permits, and so on. So there's really nothing that could be done. All of the sort of fun stuff of implementing the waterfront area plan, like building things and things like that, is essentially frozen until such time as you receive an instrument from the province. It's a little more complicated than that, and that's described on the left. Generally, it results in you apply for an application, then you declare that you've had a Schedule 2 use. Then the province, by law, must order investigations, and if those investigations come back positive, then they must issue freezes and so on. So it is a little more complicated than that, but that's kind of the Coles Notes version. The most important thing to understand is that the remediation process in British Columbia actually exempts the landowner from future liability. So it is a get out of jail free card that even if we could opt out of this process, we wouldn't want to, because we'd be responsible for contamination later down the road. So what savvy landowners often do to preempt the process is undertake voluntary remediation. So getting ahead of the freezes, starting that work before doing anything else, to try to advance that sort of lengthy process along. And that's exactly what we did in 2019. So once you start along that process, there's a lot of different options. This is a very much oversimplified graphic of the route you might take. So first you have a Schedule 2 use that has occurred on your land. And then everybody does a preliminary site investigation, which is essentially a desktop exercise confirming whether or not potential contamination exists. And if that's determined to be yes, you would then undertake your detailed site investigation. And then after that, you've got some options. You can do the dig and dump method, which is essentially remove the contaminated soil and take it to an accredited facility. That process is very expensive. You can do in situ remediation, which generally speaking takes a very long time. Or if your contamination is of a moderate level, can actually be left in the ground, and you can apply for a risk-based instrument, which is the process the town has been undergoing since we've completed our detailed site investigation. The contamination that was found on our land was within acceptable parameters. So that is the process we've been seeking. Now, like I said, this is an oversimplification. Ours is a little bit of a hybrid. We actually did remove a little bit of soil, some that was excavated from the machine shop, some other areas where it was just simply easier to throw it in a dump truck and take it to an accredited facility. So it's never this simple. It doesn't look exactly like this. This is just sort of a more easily digestible version of the process and options that we had. The green icons represent the path we are taking. So we went from preliminary site investigation, detailed site investigation, and hopefully to an instrument and building fairly soon. So in our case, it's sort of necessary to talk about delineation and the Protocol 6 process. So delineation is the process of monitoring contamination to determine its extent and concentration. This is a mandatory process when you are required to do a detailed site investigation, and it has to occur irrespective of property lines. And the reason for that, importantly, is that the purpose of delineation, or one of the important purposes of delineation, is to determine if contamination is migrated from one property to another, because that has liability and remediation obligations that come with it. So that was something we've always been obligated to do. The process often is iterative and incremental, and often is repetitive to deal with things like localized anomalies, seasonal variations, in our case, even tidal variations. So that's kind of the process. One way to think of it is if you had a location where you knew contamination might be located, you would likely start testing just on the outskirts of that area and then expand outwards until you determine the full extent. So that's exactly what we've done with the uplands, and that's a very large site. So when you factor all that in and sort of random factors that have been thrown at us, that's the reason why this has taken almost 6 years to complete the delineation process. Most importantly, You can't have remediation without delineation, and you can't have an instrument or development without remediation. So you have to complete this process in order to successfully remediate the site. Now, there are certain exemptions that are granted in certain circumstances, and this is called the Protocol 6 in our case. And this is when delineation is not feasible. An example would be the adjacent property owner doesn't let you on their land to do the testing, or it's not practical. And so we actually applied for one of these. The town, we did not want to delineate on the Crown land. Our consultants did not feel that it was practical to do so, given the contamination that was already there. And the presence of water and other factors. So we applied for a Protocol 6 and submitted that application, I think, almost a year ago now. The province, upon receiving that application, expressed concerns about the possibility of migration and a few other things. And so, at the recommendation of our consultant, we undertook limited further delineation on Crown land. So that's lot 17G in the top right there, that narrow strip of land. We put in a few extra monitoring wells and did some extra testing on that land. And then we also did further testing on our own land. And so those two items combined were intended to prove that there was no migration occurring. One, that contamination would not be found on 17G, and two, that contamination on our land was not of sufficient concentration to cause migration to adjacent lands. So sort of a two-part test to demonstrate that it was quite unlikely that contamination had migrated from the townlands. About a week before we were actually scheduled to do that testing, crews working on the machine shop ruptured an undetected and unidentified fuel tank buried on the site. This tank, for reasons unknown, was able to evade two ground-penetrating radar scans and was subsequently struck with an excavator while they were digging a hole for a sewer line. So fortunately, and a credit to the contractors and contaminated sites consultants that we've hired, as well as some city staff, the spill was contained quickly, and additional testing occurred very quickly to rule out that the spill caused further contamination. And a lot of steps were taken that actually mitigated the town's costs substantially. An example being that soil excavated from the pit that had been contaminated with the fuel contaminated water was segregated so that it could be tested and disposed of separately for to reduce the amount of soil that had to be taken to the more expensive facility. So we were quite fortunate in that event. What that did require, though, is additional testing to be tacked on to the testing we had scheduled the following week to make sure that that event and that tank was not causing further contamination. So with all of that, our current status says their contamination levels are acceptable. That's a bit of an error. The province will decide whether our contamination levels are acceptable. But what we can say is that as of Monday morning, the contamination levels that have been measured are below acceptable thresholds to allow us to apply for a certificate of compliance. So we are not planning more drilling, which is sort of the more expensive part of the testing process. And the machine shop tank rupture was safely contained and the soil safely disposed of. So that then leads us to our next steps. We're going to resubmit our P6 application with our new data. If that's approved, we'll apply for a certificate of compliance. As an added bonus, we'll be applying, our plan is to apply for a certificate of compliance for the provincial lot 17G. This will occur at a nominal additional cost, but this is not for the province's benefit. It will benefit the province, but it's not solely for that purpose. It's solely for our benefit, because in getting that certificate of compliance, it builds a stronger case that migration is not moving from our land to theirs. So it's only for us, not necessarily for them, but it is an added bonus for everybody because all of those lands are part of the waterfront area plan. Our hope is that a certificate of compliance will be issued in 2026. Likely, we're looking at submitting our applications within the next 4 to 6 months, and then we'll be waiting a few months likely for the province's review and third-party reviews of those applications. In terms of cost, we're currently close to what we budgeted for when we started in 2019. We're just over $1 million in expenditures, 170,000 of which was funded by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Our estimated total final costs at this point are less than 1.5 million. We're hoping it'll be quite a bit less than that, but there's still a lot of unknowns that we're dealing with in that process. And council will see in the 2026 budget, in the next couple of council meetings, we'll see the cost to get us over the finish line included in those budgets. It's important to note that this money actually has a fairly substantial return on investment. Generally speaking, land, once it's contaminated, will appreciate, or once it's decontaminated or remediated, will see a land valuation uplift between 15 and 50%. So when you take the assessed value of the land at the waterfront of the town-owned lands, that's an uplift of about 700,000 to 5 million using those ranges. So this is very much money well spent. In the waterfront area plan, as you all know, there is a plan to sell certain parcels, certain areas of land, and use that to fund the execution of the plan. So when we increase the value of the land we will be selling to fund the plan, we will be accelerating the waterfront area plan because we'll have more money to work with. In addition, the fact that we started this process in 2019, we have effectively we're proactive in removing this roadblock. We've also sort of accelerated implementation of the plan as well. Once you have a certificate of compliance, you can move ahead as if the land was never contaminated in the first place. So sort of just a key summary of where we're at. Like I said, no development of the uplands until the site is remediated. We started this process in 2019. It takes as long as it takes. Use the analogy of baking a cake. You can't just double the temperature and cut the time in half, or else you won't have a cake. So this is kind of how it works. It takes time over an extended period of time, drilling, testing, so on. We are not remediating Crown land. However, some incidental investigation or remediation of Crown land has occurred, and specifically on Lot 17G. The delineation process was mandatory. We did apply for some exemptions. The province expressed some concerns, and so we then therefore undertook additional delineation that was otherwise required, and now we're simply seeking a smaller exemption. So our next steps, P6 application, then if that's approved, then certificate of compliance application, and then if that's approved, then we can start developing the uplands. And lastly, and most importantly, we're still on the fastest and least expensive path to remediation, and our remediation costs are very low comparatively to what remediation of a site of this size and characteristic usually costs, and our ROI on that investment is still high. So we're in a very good position, and that's my presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Director Balababa. Okay, Councillor Gourlay, Councillor Patterson. Okay.
Thanks for the great presentation, Director Balababa. Can you comment on the province's lands and Salinas First Nation and any delineation that may happen and remediation and whatnot? Do they have requirements to do that, or commitments to do that, or a timeline?
Through the chair, cleanup of the water lots is included in the reconciliation agreement with Salinas First Nation. As for they're actually, I guess you could say maybe an easy way to explain it is they're where we were in 2019. They know the land is contaminated, and they're undertaking detailed investigations to determine the full extent and nature. And at that point, they will then start to have an idea and it is unfortunately just an idea of the effort they'll need to make to clean it up. So you have to understand with contamination is you do the tests and then you start remediating and then something doesn't work and then you have to do so very much like what we went through. We started delineating and then we weren't getting results that were making sense, and so we had to do more testing and so on. So it's very much an open book. It's very hard to predict where they're at, but they're sort of just starting the process, I guess you would say.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. I do have a few, but you've got that summary up there. Delineation in mandatory should be is
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
My first one is lot 17G. Is that part of the agreement that the province has with Stamanis, or is that kind of standing alone?
Through the chair, that I believe is part of the agreement. All of the Crown land in that area is part of the agreement.
Okay, so they what we've done to work in our favor has now that we have gone this far, and it's great news. I've only been here a very short period of time. I was hoping to see this many years ago. Will we be sitting down with Stamanis? And I know they're quite a ways behind us now, as you explained, but trying to work collaboratively.
Through the chair, yes. We've been active in keeping Stamanis informed as to our efforts with remediation and vice versa. So yes, we will be collaborating with them. Something I should note, because the water lots are actually water, they're not subject to the same approvals that trigger the same site freezes under the Environmental Management Act. So in their case, there could actually be a little bit of development prior to obtaining the instruments, but we're working with them on that. So we are very closely working together with Stamanis and the province on the remediation portfolio.
Just one for an explanation on page the current status. Next steps. If P6 approved, apply for a risk-based certificate. Could you explain risk-based certificate?
Through the chair, essentially a risk-based certificate of compliance is where contamination is left in the ground and it's deemed that the level of contamination, level and type of contamination is low enough that the risk is low enough by allowing that site to be developed. So if our risk-based certificate of contamination certificate of compliance is approved, the contamination will stay in the ground, but the province's certificate will state that the levels of contamination are not dangerous enough to warrant cleaning them up.
Thank you.
Mayor Beeston?
You mentioned that the province was now doing some drilling of their own.
Through the chair, yes. It's our understanding that they're undertaking a detailed site investigation on Slack Point.
And is that in any way going to become our responsibility?
Through the chair, we don't believe so. Most of the contamination in the water lots and Slack Point, why it's called Slack Point is the contamination is the coal byproduct. That contamination existed before, that activity shut down before the town took possession of any land in the area. So the town is not a contributor to that contamination. It's possible, although based on the information we have, it seems remote, that the province in their work detects contamination that is coming from our land, but we have no evidence of that at this point, and all the work we've done appears to actually completely rule that out.
And you don't anticipate their drilling to in any way delay our application?
Through the chair, we can't really see a reason why they would be able to do that. If we can demonstrate, it's certainly possible they could refuse our P6 application, but we don't see any evidence that they would be justified in making that decision.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Exciting to be having the conversation after 6 years, 6 long years. We were all starry-eyed. Most of the people at the table were starry-eyed and thinking that we'd be having big important meetings on planning how we're going to deal with the waterfront based on the plan. And here we are at the last year of the term, second term, and now feeling hopeful again that we might actually get to see it. I want to thank staff for their continued tenacity and stick-with-itness that it's taken to get us this far. And it has been a convoluted path without question. So thank you to staff for getting us here. I know council did our part in trying to lobby as best we could during the UBCM conference this past fall, and trying to make sure that they are poised and ready to receive our P6 applications. So hopefully it will move through quickly. We can only hope. There's no more QP strikes, so that was going to be a barrier if it was any earlier. So let's hope it moves quickly, and hopefully be actually having to have some meetings of our waterfront area plan steering committee before the next election. It'd be very exciting. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. So the COC is the floodgate. So I guess my question is, when in 2026 do you anticipate the floodgate coming off? And then how quickly after that, or can we even do work preemptively, because it's a strategic priority to subdivide, rezone, market the pieces of property that are going to be marketed to fund other aspects of the project?
Through the chair, we don't know exactly how long. We have an estimate of when we're going to submit our applications. We don't know when they'll be approved. Usually it's a period of months. There's a third-party review process that has to occur. So our consultants have kind of, when I asked them, would this stretch into 2027 because we're planning for budgeting, they were like, no. And then I was like, are you sure? And they're like, no, absolutely not. But they can't really provide a time for within 2026. So hopefully by sort of mid-2026, we'll be having a certificate of compliance. In terms of preliminary work that we can do prior to that, after if our P6 is approved, that's a very promising development. And at that point, we could start drawing up subdivision plans and those types of things to have them ready for approval. The other thing is, as council will recall, we've applied for a grant for infrastructure development. If we receive that grant, infrastructure is one of the things that is exempt from those freezes, so we could actually start working on it while we're waiting for our certificate of compliance. So there is plenty we can do once we have a fairly good, once we're in the position to be cautiously optimistic, where there's plenty we can do to sort of get the leg up in advance of having our certificate of compliance.
In terms of value added, is there a sweet spot, like infrastructure in, infrastructure not in? I'm going to continue to be polite, but I can speak very strategically about. I'll be polite.
Through the chair, in terms of value added, land always goes up if it's serviced and remediated. So if we have the opportunity to install infrastructure prior to selling, generally speaking, that's a positive, especially if that infrastructure is paid for with grant money. But the other thing is too, is we don't necessarily have to have the infrastructure in the ground. If we have the commitments in place, we can actually self-bond for the infrastructure, and then the value of the land would account for the fact that the developer doesn't have to pay for it. So we have options there. That would be part of a more detailed appraisal process we would do once we're getting closer to the position to be able to move land.
Okay, thanks very much, staff. It's exciting to know what we're waiting for now. Moving on to 5 reports. 5.1 is New City Hall, and the recommendation is that the committee recommend that council 1, direct staff to initiate a public engagement process to explore the following. A, building a new city hall on the Buller Street properties, either as a standalone facility or as part of a mixed-use development. And B, purchasing or leasing new or existing office space in the downtown for a city hall. And number 2, authorize staff to explore opportunities for leasing or purchasing office space in the downtown with landowners and developers. Move my count.
No, I would ask if we could separate 1 and 2. Vote on them separately.
It's okay by me. Okay.
I will move number 1.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay, moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor McKay. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty. Seconded by Councillor McKay to discuss number 1, A and B, and then separate out number 2. Yes. Okay, all in favor?
Well, I wanted to speak on number 1.
No, I know, but don't we have to move it? No? Okay, perfect. Again, very rusty. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, just a question through the staff. When we were on number 2, either standalone or mixed-use development, just going on what Colwood has done. I believe it's Colwood where they've got their own doctor's offices. And I know we have kicked around the idea of having commercial space in there in a new city hall or space for the library. Would it be possible to approach VHA to see about having them participate in a portion of it? And as far as supplying doctors, medical space, and then it would having residential there would, if we go that route, would be very beneficial. So, just a thought. If as well as the library, look at the potential for medical space as well. Is it just
Just through to staff?
throwing the thought out there if we haven't?
Okay. Councillor McKay?
I just want to comment on that, and I believe that is part of the report, is that discussion has already been ongoing with Island Health with regards to the family practice clinic at the current urgent care building, and because they've been looking at finding a new space, a bigger space. So that conversation, we had to delay that or postpone that when we had to stop the conversation when the not referendum but AAP process was failed, and so the conversation stopped at that point. But it would be definitely a possibility to pick up that conversation again as part of this discussion and the information gathering and public input. So,
I was unaware of that, unfortunately.
Councillor Gourlay?
Thank you. Thanks so much to staff for a really detailed report and analysis, really exploring all those options, and I am happy to proceed with options 1 to 3 in terms of public engagement. Could I have some examples or kind of what you have in mind in terms of public engagement, kind of the scope of that and how fulsome would be appropriate?
Through the chair, we've been in discussions with the consultant that did our OCP. So I think you would see consultation similar to what occurred during the OCP, various methods of engagement, getting people's feedback on what ideas they have. and then sort of a distilling of options and a recommendation coming from that. We haven't designed a specific process yet.
They certainly seemed qualified and creative in their approach during the OCP, so I'm definitely comfortable with that. Cool.
Oh, Councilor Mackay.
I just want to make a comment. We had, because of the AAP process, there was a tremendous amount of community interest in the conversation, and I hope interested parties will read thoroughly the analysis that is included in this staff report, because it certainly does touch on what feels to me like all of the big conversations that have been had and all of the sort of things that have come and gone in terms of possibilities for the building of a new city hall. And so it does answer those questions, and it explains in the analysis, it explains why we have rendered it down to three possibilities. So, or two possibilities really. So I just would encourage people to read it well. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Seems to come up so fast when yeah, just, I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts about this, and as the conversation goes along, I'll probably say a lot of it. My initial reaction, and I conveyed this to staff after just skimming the agenda, thank you so much for, particularly in the case of options 5, 6, 7, and 8, reducing them to the absurd. There has been an inordinate amount of energy wasted discussing those potential options. We all have the benefit of experience and past projects to know that the viability wasn't there, but it's good to see that on paper and make the list shorter. Same with what I would call 4A and 4B, either a new fire hall on the Buller site or a new fire hall slash city hall up on 6th Avenue is not really feasible. So that is good. So it is great to get the list as short as it gets. Having said that, I make it sort of mentally even shorter in my list. The appeal of leasing is incredibly attractive to me. 45% of the cost of financing an actual building. Building on the Buller site is a standalone. While it's in keeping with the elements of the OCP, I think it's not in keeping with the spirit of the density that we're seeking in the downtown to get ahead of the infrastructure deficit. So that one sort of falls off. And then just the sheer battle of a mixed-use facility with not so much non-residential, but the residential development. The options to do that put us either, if it's affordable, we've been down that road, and if we want to go down again, I can speak about the pitfalls of that, or with a private developer. I think it still leaves us in a situation where the communication of that and the public kicking that around exceedingly difficult. We're at a misinformation disadvantage no matter how we slice it. So I mean, I'm really intrigued by the leasing option, I have to say, but I'm also intrigued to hear the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Leasing might be upfront the most economical way to go, but at the end of the day, the community doesn't have an asset. They've paid all that money and they have nothing to show for it except a larger space. By using the Buller Street property and the potential for commercial and then the residential above helps offset the costs, which at the outset are higher, but it also does something for the downtown community by having a new batch of middle income residents down there, supplying some vibrancy and more going into the economy. So by leasing office space, we're not getting anything but office space. By building on Buller Street, we have a complex that at the end of the day, the citizens of the community will own. There is return there and potential for ongoing income, ongoing revenues.
Anyone else? Okay, So I guess call the question on 1A and B, direct staff to initiate a public engagement process to explore building a new city. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stevens, sorry about that.
People, my memory's pretty good, but but maybe people can remind me. I don't think there's any scenario where anything other than the city hall getting built on the Buller project, unless we form a housing corporation and actually do the building ourselves. Anything that happens in the airspace above City Hall is going to be either a government sponsored or private sector sponsored initiative. And so, so I don't think there's any money to be made there by us. There might be small income from a commercial space, but there's the initial cost of building that commercial space. I'm really at the point, and I think this is this is where I've been for longer than I acknowledged. We need a city hall. Like, I just am done having that conversation with people about whether we need a city hall. We need a city hall. The city hall serves essentially one main play to efficiently administer the services that people count on in this town. So we need a space, and every day that we don't have that space is more money. Leasing would be potentially a faster option to get into, and the faster we get into something, the less we're paying overall as a community. And I don't know if there's any advantage, as I came down to City Hall last week and saw more people crawling all over the roof working on the air conditioning units.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Yeah, Councillor McKay.
We're not debating the form of the city hall right now. We're just simply discussing whether or not we should direct staff to begin a public engagement process. So I would like to redirect us, please, so that we can focus on the actual motion.
And that's exactly where I was getting. I don't think we should spend any energy asking the public if they want to do a project on Buller. I think we should look at leasing as the preferred option and move ahead with that.
Okay, so we'll call the question. 1A and B, direct staff to initiate a public engagement process to explore building a new city hall on the Buller Street properties, either as a standalone facility or as part of a mixed-use development, and B, purchasing or leasing a new or existing office space in the downtown for a city hall. So all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so as requested by Councillor Patterson, number 2 is authorize staff to explore opportunities for leasing or purchasing office space in the downtown with landowners and developers. Moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Gourlay. Anybody want to talk about it? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Chair. If you read into it, they're damn near both the same, but I would rather see our staff expend their time and energies on the first one and going around exploring opportunities. Right now, I think we can all visualize downtown. There is nothing there. There is nothing there to lease. There is nothing there to purchase that I can see. So I can't see why we would be getting staff to expend that time and energies. Let's move ahead on the public engagement. Let's get the people involved now. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens? Sorry.
I could when I think of the perfect site to lease on, I think of Buller Street. We could sell that property, exercise our right of first refusal on 8 hectares of parkland in the Lamont development, pay 65% less to finance the building over the course of it, let the building be someone else's headache, and end up in the very same spot for way less money than and way less hassle than going the other route.
Thank you. if there's no one else, can I put a question through to staff? So my understanding with number 2 is just that staff would include perhaps a partnership with landowners or development to develop up the property and throw that back in the options for council to consider. Was I incorrect?
Through the chair, that's one option, but it should be noted that we do have, through our role as a development regulator, we are aware of projects that come through where this could also be an option. So it's not that recommendation 2 is not limited to a particular site. It could be anywhere in the downtown.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Mayor Beeston?
I'm kind of along this too. Is there an actual difference between 1B and number 2?
I could
Through to staff.
through the chair, the reason I think they're written in as separate recommendations is because one could occur outside of the engagement process as opportunities arise. So if a developer is developing a major site in the downtown with significant commercial space, we could start having that conversation. That's why they're separate.
Anyone else? Okay, let's call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, she passes. All right, 5.2, traffic request policy. Recommendation is that the committee recommend the council adopt the 2025 traffic request policy 11-5460-A as presented in the report by the Infrastructure Services Department dated November 18th, 2025. Moved? No. Moved by Councillor Gourlay, seconded by Councillor Mackay. Okay. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. Speaking against this, first of all, by throwing an extra workload on our manager of infrastructure services and the staff up there, when, in my opinion, okay, we aren't getting the amount of calls as what I've experienced in the past, and seeing this more as an enforcement issue. First of all, I don't see anywhere in here where the RCMP are involved, and secondly, if it's such as that, then could we not get our bylaw people out there with the speed reader board and stuff in areas of concern? We already have them on staff. We just talked about waterfront. We just talked about City Hall. We have other large projects, storm drains, etc. So I don't see this being necessarily thrown into Public Works, our Director of Public Works. So I think it's more of an enforcement issue, and we have two avenues. One is the RCMP. The other is getting our bylaw people to enforce it. So.
Was there a question on that? No? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Mackay, and then Councillor Stevens, and then Councillor Gourlay.
Thank you. I feel as though there are things that actually do have to be decided, like for instance, when an individual is asking us to put in a crosswalk or a lighted crosswalk, or looking for some kind of change in pattern or slowing down, all the rest of it. It's not just about enforcement, it's actually about how we set up our traffic movement. The comment that stood out for me is in the second, on page 88, the second paragraph, traffic engineering is a defined area of engineering expertise that is subject to enhanced levels of public opinion. That was magical. That took me back to my teaching days where everyone's been to school, therefore everybody knows how to do it. It's not simple and it's not straightforward, and there are guidelines, and we are compelled to not just knee-jerk react to a phone call or a complaint. There has to be a process, and I think the fact that other communities have this in place is modeling the way that we should be also considering doing it. I like the way this lays out. I'm just going to comment on my favorite piece of it, which is step 3. So if it turns out that we do look like we need to make a change, we've done the investigation, we see that we have a problem, we're acknowledging that we have a problem, we need to find a better way to do it. Then part of step 3 is to seek feedback from the public. My question in that is, do we have a plan for doing that? Because I have a suggestion on how we might. Do we have a process in mind for seeking public feedback in step 3 through to staff?
Through the chair, no, and it would probably depend on the scale of what's being proposed. If it was something like changing the speed limit in the whole downtown core, that would be a different animal than changing a speed limit on a small street. Thank you for picking up on that particular point, because that's one of the things I've learned through the hard school of experience, is building things and then finding out that the rest of the people on the street didn't like it. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, so I appreciate that. I recognize that some decisions, some final approvals would be made by staff, the smaller ones, and other ones would come back to council for consideration. I wonder if we could explore the idea of, on the ones that are going to come back to council, big enough to be discussed at council, could they be taken to a group like CPAC for CPAC input on whether or not the public sees that as a good solution, or you know what I'm saying? It seems to be that's an existing structure that we have. It's functioning, highly functional. Can we tap into that group? I don't want to say an extra step or something, but we're making big changes, then they have to be well considered. Just a possibility and a thought to be considered. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. Yeah, to some extent, echo Councillor Mackay. The only thing worse than a bureaucracy is an adhocracy. So I really, I think this process would. I think with coming events, I think it will really work well in terms of focusing and laying out a process and giving us something. If someone says to us, I think this is the most pressing traffic issue in Ladysmith, and I said, well, we've got a process. Let me hand you over to staff who are going to be the experts who advise us anyway. It just cuts out a few steps and a bit of hand wringing. Where I really think it's the future that I see it really dovetailing well with is the mobility plan, where we end up having a whole public consultation process that is going to point out probably a lot of holes in our transportation networks, and to some extent maybe we can have an A and a B list, and an emergent that's following this process, but also a triage list of the things we'd really like to do, the sidewalk gaps we'd like to plug, the lights we'd like to put in, the what have you. And so sort of come at it at both episodes. Pressing needs, got a process. Longer term planning, you've got a process. So I think it can, I mean, devil's in the detail, but I think it's a good step in a good direction. Thank you.
Councillor Gorley?
Yeah, thanks for the previous comments. I completely agree. And I like this. It's a simple, pragmatic plan where we can direct issues as they arise. I think about our practice over the course of this year, and at one council meeting and at one committee of the whole meeting, we've brought forward motions for niche projects because we've heard complaints about it because we haven't had a better tool, and this is a better tool. So happy to support it and look forward to seeing the current examples that are listed here. We'll go through this, find solutions in the coming budget years. Thank you.
Mayor Beeston?
I concur with pretty much everything that's been said so far. I think what's most important to me on this issue is that these are issues that are being raised by the community. It speaks directly to immediate quality of life. And I think that this is something that hits the residents where they live, and that they have they're making these requests, and I think we need to respond. So
Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Patterson opposed. Motion passes. Moving on, 5.3. 2025 Q3 financial update, and the recommendation is that the committee receive the staff report dated November 18th, 2025 regarding the 2025 Q3 financial update from the Director of Financial Services. Moved by Councillor Gourlay, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any questions? Okay. Councillor Patterson?
It's great to see so much stuff under budget. So hopefully we're going to have money set aside that we can possibly use in this year's upcoming budget discussions. Just on page 94, Public Works and Engineering. Revenues projected to be $76,000 more than expected. Expenses projected to be $102,000 less than budget. But the other ones all say under budget. What is the difference? Is there any?
Through staff.
Through the chair. So just trying to differentiate when the town does work that's being billed out, is the funds that come in as revenue. So we did not think we were going to make as much in revenue in those situations. So that's why they're saying we're getting more revenue. I don't want to say we're under budget because we're actually be over, but in this case, you want it to say that you're going to be getting more monies in that case. But because of the way that the crews have been working, and also the vacancies, we're not spending as much either. So it's less than that. So it is under budget as well, but it's trying to show that there's just a difference in revenues being, you want to have more revenues and you want to be under budget.
We're in good shape.
Budget. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Gourlay?
Yeah, the over and under budget caught me off a little bit too while reading through this because it depends on what direction you're looking at it from. But okay, so my question, and I've asked this in various iterations in previous years, but how come we don't have $150 million? And what is an accumulated surplus in the most simple terms?
In simple terms. Yeah, so the way that the requirements are to present the financial statements is not like your revenues and your expenses net together and whatever's left over surplus. It's not that easy. So some of the things that are not categorized as that you can't take in that an expense, they don't show onto the financial statement. So that's why there's not $150,000 in an accumulated surplus at this point in time. So something like DCC, like the money comes into the town's accounts, but it can't be used. This actually doesn't recognized as revenue until it's used on a project. So that's just an example of one of the monies that actually would be part of your cash, but it's not showing as revenue on the what you think is a profit or loss or their income statement, that kind of stuff. So that's why it's not a true number of what's sitting in our bank, that there's not $150 million sitting in the town's bank accounts by any means. And you also have reserves and other things that just don't show. It is part of that, but they just don't show that way when it comes to do what's called PSAB accounting, public sector accounting standards. I know I can go through the.
It's very niche, yeah.
As our auditor often shows, when it comes to our audited financial statements, it's not. It's not your typical way of doing financial statements. So
Okay, well, I would just say that these documents show a consistent, very responsible financial stewardship from our management staff. So thank you to all of our department heads for their careful financial stewardship.
Okay, Councillor Stevens?
Let me say it in an even more convoluted fashion. You're doing a horrible job of proving to people who say we can't manage money right. How about that? No, it's excellent and as clear as financial statements can be. You always come through with that. So thank you very much for that. The one thing I wanted to ask about the traffic management plans. There's a savings there. Was that because some weren't needed, or just the costs were cheaper?
Through staff.
So we did have, there was $50,000 that was moved out of legal at the time. We didn't have the total amount, so we have spent some of it, but I'll pass it on to Director Barfoot to answer the specifics.
Through the chair, there's still a little bit ways to go because the implementation part of those, but they did come in a lot less expensive than we had anticipated. So yeah, there is going to be some. If the $50,000 was a budget, there's going to be some remaining funds there for sure.
Great. Enough for a flag?
All right. Seeing no more questions. Yes. All in favor? None opposed? Okay, on to 5.4, update to the Intercommunity Business License Bylaw, and the recommendation is that the committee recommend that council, 1, approve the proposed revisions to the Intercommunity Business License Bylaw, which is attachment A, and to direct staff to prepare an amendment bylaw, and 2, endorse the establishment of a formal agreement among Vancouver Island Intercommunity Business License Partners, ICBL Partners, and direct the corporate officer to sign the finalized agreement. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Mayor Beeston. Any discussion? All right, I'll call the question. Anyone in favor? Oh, look at that. No opposed? Motion carries. Okay. 5.5 is 2023 to 2026 strategic priorities update, and the recommendation is that the committee receive the 2023 to 2026 strategic priorities update dated November 18th, 2025. Want to move that? Moved by Councillor Gourlay. Seconded by Councillor Mackay. Okay. Oh, no. Any discussion or? Anyone? All right, Councillor Gourlay.
This is exciting progress. I would encourage any listeners and community members who want to know about how things are going, how money's being spent, where different projects are at. This lays it out, color coded with percentages. So if you're not looking at a copy of the full agenda package, find it online and enjoy the interesting updates.
Thank you for filling that silence. Okay, anyone else? Nope. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Everybody's in favor. Okay. All right. We will be doing new business, and under that, we're looking at the late agenda item, and the recommendation is that council amend. Oh, never mind. Council submissions. This came from Councillor Patterson. It's RV housing for site security. Councillor Patterson has requested that the committee discuss permitting registered owners of light industrial or industrial property to have one housing unit, including an RV, on the property to accommodate 24-hour security. The unit must not accommodate more than 2 persons and must meet all island health regulations, including sewer and septic. The living unit can include modular buildings or RV, but must be CSA approved. Did you want to?
Can I speak on that? Yep, if you know it's mine.
Yes.
And thank you to staff for wording it the way it is, because I'm not great at that stuff. Earlier this year, a property owner in the south area of town lost valuable equipment, very expensive equipment, due to theft, and that area is very susceptible to thefts. I could refer to the people living up in the bush, but I won't. And it is prevalent down in that area. Earlier, they had been told by the town bylaw people that they had to remove the RV that they had a person living in acting as security. And up to that point, there hadn't been an issue. And when that RV was removed because they had to, they lost I can't remember $30,000, $60,000. Now the town in 2017 bought the Peerless Road or on Thick Road, the biosolids place, and there was an RV there that a gentleman had been living in for a long time, and in fact is still living in the RV. We were aware of it at that time, but it was a kind of a good neighbor thing, protecting that piece of town property, and is still protecting that property. So what I would like to see us do is, because of our being business friendly, for those places and the light industrial areas are traditionally north and south of us, where there is not a hell of a lot of residential or that kind of there's not a lot of people around, especially at night, and again, they are susceptible to theft. So I would like us to look at whatever our bylaw is that prohibits the use of people living in RVs in those particular areas, that the RV or modular home or whatever can be used as temporary housing for an undetermined amount of time for security reasons, to help these folks with the to avoid these issues, and to go through having to get riparian reports and all the rest of it. Again, it's putting a handicap on people that are just trying to make a living and trying to create business, hopefully employment in the area. So it was discussed earlier tonight about we have bylaws and sometimes we go against them. Sometimes things change and we need to look at how we're working with and dealing with the community. So in a long drawn out statement, I would like to see us I guess lighten up, change the bylaw so we can, so those folks, there is other units out there, and especially down on West Down Road, where people are living in an RV. But these people, for whatever reason, somebody complained and they had to pull it out. And like I said, the town has one, and I believe we've budgeted for next year to spend money to take it out and put something else in. Why not leave it? It's working. It ain't broke. So, thank you.
Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. So I got a couple of thoughts about this. I think it was almost 2 years ago, maybe almost this meeting, this COW meeting. I brought forward, and it was from some communities members inquiring if we could have some latitude around RVs. And I'm just first hiving off modular from RV, and at the time I was kind of like 51-49. I thought, well, this is maybe something in a housing crisis we can do. At that point, the director of development made a very convincing argument around RVs not being year-round in terms of condensation, mold, habitation, something, thin edge of the wedge, not something we want to get into. So I think at the very least, I want to exclude that, but have nothing against a modular or some kind of adequate housing unit. That being said, I'm kind of in a, what problem is this the answer to? Because in the I-1 zone, you can have a caregiver or a caretaker building is an allowed secondary use. So if you've got a business running in the south end, and there's like 20 plus that you can run in the I-1 zone, you can already do this. So, and if you've got an empty piece of property, what are you caretaking? And if you're doing something that is not an allowed use, well then it's not an allowed use and you don't get that. But right now, businesses that are doing accepted uses on I-1 zoned properties completely have this option. So I guess I'm kind of like, what's the problem? And at the very least, if someone can point out the problem, I'd be very reluctant to say RVs. I think it's a thin edge of a substandard housing wedge that, like the discussions we've had around living boards and such, you quickly can get in a highest court in the land, constitutional mess, security of the person argument if someone refuses to vacate a very unsafe situation because you've allowed that wedge to sort of be placed. So those are my thoughts initial, and if we can in the discussion cover those, that'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Gourlay?
Thank you. Actually, it's interesting, Councillor Stevens. I don't remember having this conversation in this term regarding RVs, but maybe I missed that meeting. I am very, very open to this idea. I would put through to staff, can you help us understand what currently is allowed for someone who wants a dwelling unit in light industrial for purposes of a caretaker or other? And if we were to approve RVs as dwelling units in this zone, what mechanism would be best to do so? Would that be a temporary use permit or a zoning change or other?
Through the chair, in terms of the first question, a caretaker dwelling is basically a dwelling unit in conjunction with industrial use. So there could be a prefabricated unit or something like that. In terms of amending the zoning bylaw, the bylaw could simply be amended to allow an RV to be used for caretaker purposes, although there would likely need to be some incidental amendments to our sewer and water bylaw to deal with hookups for an RV.
Mayor Beeston?
Things do change a lot. One thing I will say is RVs are now year-round living habitats. People live all over Vancouver Island in RVs year-round. Affordability is a very real thing. Telling somebody they have to buy a modular home and have it moved onto the site for something like this, allowing people to have a caretaker on the property, it still has to be accessible to them. And, realistically, times are hard out there. I guess the town has had an RV on our site for a few years, so there must be some ability for RVs to be used as year-round occupancy. Another thing is, I know that our current bylaws do allow for caretakers on sites that are being used for industrial or various commercial purposes. There is also a need for people nowadays to protect their land, their bare land. They may not currently have a licensed business operating on it, but they may have things that they're storing out there, or they may have, be planning on setting up a business or just to protect their land from it being, co-opted by others and protected, and have somebody out there watching for people doing damage or dumping garbage or any of the other things that we're unfortunately faced with as a society today. So I think a little bit of leniency could be called for in this day and age.
Councillor Stevens?
I guess another thought I've had, in this particular neighborhood, we've had a hell of a time getting people to comply with like things that are on like provisions on title in terms of hooking into sewer. In some cases, it's been years long battles with bylaw enforcement. Then we get into sewer and septic, which is Island Health's wheelhouse, not ours. So, and I just wonder if the notion of affordability goes out the window. I've never known a septic field to be cheap, and an RV plus a septic field is yes a cheaper, but the whole reason we've got it's on title for properties out there that you need to hook into sewer or make provision. I mean, we had a cannabis, we've approved a cannabis, that nothing has come of it yet, but a cannabis operation that was going to have, I think, CVRD water and then their own on-site. But we're talking about, in that case, probably hundreds of thousands or millions, but even a simple residential system done well is not cheap. But all this being said is we've got creeks out there. We've got we've got a lot of bylaw enforcement that is difficult for us to do, and we have a history of properties out there dragging their feet to comply with things that are on title. I think going loosey goosey with a bylaw, if title don't do it, again, thin edge of the wedge. So I still am thinking it's a solution looking for a problem here. If you're running a business, you can put a caretaker suite up, bar none. It's one of like half a dozen secondary uses. So I don't see what the problem is. If you're storing a whole bunch of stuff out there, the use is either compliant or it's not. If it's not compliant, then I don't know what you can expect in terms of needing to keep it secure because you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. If it is compliant, then you can secure it. So round and round we go, but I don't know where we're headed, I guess, with this. We have provisions now that allow you to do it, and I don't think there's any wiggle room that's needed in those provisions to make it easier for people to do. It doesn't get cheaper, it doesn't get a whole lot easier, and it doesn't get a whole lot cheaper because the most important, enduring, and the thing that Island Health and we, in terms of our responsibility around riparian areas, are going to enforce is the septic and sewer, which is you can't go cheap on. So I don't see a whole lot of benefit, and I see a few costs that are probably unacceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. Since 2017, the town has had an RV on their property out there, and they're connected to whatever they're using for sewer, and it has been approved by Island Health, my understanding. So it's worked for the town for almost 10 years. A very similar system could probably work for anybody else. And as far as expense, an RV is considerably less expensive than a modular home. You don't have to put it on a foundation, etc., etc. And they are perfectly livable because I know actually we have neighbors that are up island that are living in an RV, and actually there's 5 of them on the little cul-de-sac, and they're totally happy living there year round. So I think there's no need to make a mountain out of a molehill here. It's worked for the town for 10 years. I can see it working for the town for a long time. We've even put a cover over it. So what has worked for us, why don't we make it available to other business people so it can work for them as well?
Mayor Beeston and then Councillor Mackay.
I just wanted to clarify, I was in no way recommending that anybody using an RV would not be subject to the proper sewer and septic regulations. They can tie in just as easily as a modular home can. And the second issue is that people can be in compliance and not have a working business. It's you can own your land and have your land. You don't have to have a business. You can still be in compliance, but you can still want to protect it as well.
Councillor Mackay?
I mean, in theory, I think this is okay. I think the critical piece here is that properties are held to the same standard as any other location where they have to be hooked up safely through Island Health. That is key. And I don't think there's any wiggle room on that. I think it also, under these circumstances, if we're going to be considering it custodial or for security purposes, that's different than a person having a residential lot in town and wanting to live in their RV on their lot. I think we need to make a really strong distinction there. I think if it's there, it's for the purpose of security, and I think that part needs to be clear. So if we're in the light industrial area and there is a reason to be protecting the work site, then I think there's an argument there for it. I think what we have to do, if we're going to make a recommendation to staff, it needs to be very much around looking for wording and searching out the necessary details here in order to make sure that we're safeguarded as well. The bottom line is safety of individuals comes down onto our shoulders as well at the end of the day, whether it's lack of fire access for fire protection or whether it's unsanitary living conditions. So we have to also keep that in mind as well for helping people look after themselves. So,
Councillor Gourlay.
Thank you. So a couple things come to mind as we discuss. First, I would not be comfortable crafting a motion and getting this approved tonight without further staff dialogue and recommendation. I think that would not be appropriate. But like I said, I'm very open to this as a possibility, and I think that we need to be creative and think outside the box with housing in general. Another thing, yes, people are living in RVs. In this community around us, I kind of think about secondary suites. They weren't permitted for various, for historically, people were building them anyway or retrofitting houses. So they clearly wanted to do them. We created a bylaw to allow secondary suites and help people do it well, safely, equitably, in a regulated manner that's easy to navigate. So there's lots of other examples where bylaws kind of caught up with the desire path of people's behavior, and we got something solid in place. And this may very well be something like that. I think about the close cousins of RVs, tiny houses that have been popular for a decade now. And the wheels, we can already have tiny house. We can already have very, very small secondary suites or accessory dwelling units on a foundation and so on. And I think that's great. It's a creative option for people. The wheels-based, trailer-based type of tiny house are not allowed. If we're going to address RVs in certain zones, I'd like to include tiny houses in that conversation and get staff feedback and recommendations about that. I could probably cook up a motion along that line if there's interest, or we can just keep discussing a bit.
If it's okay, Councillor Patterson, I'm just going to hop in and further to what Councillor Gourlay just brought up is that I seeing the year-round livable RVs, a tiny home is financially comparable. And probably set up and in a way that's a little more conducive to our being able to inspect them and set up with whatever services they're going to need, septic if they hook up to sewer, whatever, water, all that good stuff. And I do believe that there would already be bylaws and standards in place. So further to Councillor Patter's suggestion that they're CSA approved, I think we would want to throw tiny homes in that conversation as well. Sorry, just my 2 bits because I keep moving myself down the line here. Councillor Patterson.
Okay, just what they need to meet Island Health standards. There's no way around that. 24-hour security is the reasoning behind it. You can't just throw one out there on your property, whether it's light industrial or not, in my opinion. And they're not in in front of us is not in residential areas. It is in very defined zoning. So they're out there. I don't know why this one particular property was picked on, because there is others out there in the same area, including the towns. Let's try and be business friendly and accommodate this or items like that. And anyways, I'm just going to leave it. They have to meet those requirements.
Well, I believe our bylaw system is complaint based, so if somebody complained about it, that's how it landed here. So, Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, I had a few points, and then a point in line with Councillor Gourlay's. I don't know if the town property is the best example because it's a complying use with the secondary secondary use that we've deemed unacceptable and are moving away from because it's substandard. It's a bit of an apple and orange comparison, but we just had a long debate within the last couple of months and 2 meetings, or maybe 3, where we talked about the property on Morgan Road that had RVs and hookups, and the enforcement capacity and dollars that went into looking after that around the hookups and the riparian. And residential or not, the same environmental issues exist and the same potential hassles exist. To Councillor Gourlay's point, though, we're not going to. There's nothing that I can conceive of in terms of a motion coming out tonight that I wouldn't need more information. The one that's glaring to me, and in my mind, the stumbling block with tiny homes is the building code. Just can't quite seem to get its head around it, but it hasn't. So it's tough to enforce what you haven't been given direction on how to enforce. And it's my understanding, could 100% be wrong, that a modular, like a single wide or a double wide or a construction trailer, can be CSA approved, but I don't know about RVs being CSA approved. I know that I've known people who live in single wides and stuff who run into issues with the CSA approval is too old and they can't get insurance, and yet, so I don't know enough about that to know whether we'd be giving permission to people to do something that's in terms of insurance or legalities, something that they shouldn't be doing. So I've heard a few people say a motion. I think the motion would be to kick it, at the very least, kick it back to staff to get more detail. But I don't know if we need to make a list of what those details are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Gourlay.
So I'd like to move that the committee recommend that council request a staff report on the viability of permitting RVs and trailer-based tiny houses as accessory dwelling units and caretaker dwelling units in Ladysmith.
On industrial zones.
I was just going to say, like, recommend appropriate zones.
Through the chair. Do
Yeah.
you want it to come directly to council, or do you want it to come back to a committee of the whole for like more elaborated discussion?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that moved by Councillor Gourlay, seconded by Councillor Stevens. So it's a whole new conversation. Councillor Patterson, did you ever hear that?
Just again, the time that it's going to take. We don't meet for another 2 months, and the time that it's going to take, it's just more work for staff. It's going to move it along. To me, it's a very simple thing. I will support it. It's just not the outcome that it should be. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm not even. Actually, can I get the corporate officer just to read the motion back so I can read it properly?
That the committee recommend that council direct staff to return to a future committee of the whole meeting with a report that looks at the viability of permitting RVs or tiny homes as we're not going to use the properties to provide security, to provide on-site security. Is that correct?
Yeah, as accessory dwelling units or caretaker dwelling units.
I'm sorry, there's no public questions or comments on committee of the whole? You're welcome to email council after the fact if you want. Okay, did you get that? Okay, can I ask a question through to the director of development services? So including the verbiage of additional dwelling unit in that, is that going to conflict with the industrial zoning, or is it okay to have ADU in there as well as the verbiage for caretaker suite? Like if we put an ADU in there, my concern is that you might have folks it might open up so that you actually have two units on a industrial lot, or is that
Through the chair, we can craft the bylaw any way that council wants. I would just remind the committee that the more scope that's added to the proposed changes, the longer it will take for staff to craft the changes and come back with something.
Gotcha. Mayor Beeston?
Just wondering if putting in an or there would alleviate that, like an accessory building or caretakers, as opposed to.
Through Seth? Does that change it?
Through the chair, if the scope that the committee is discussing is investigating RVs for caretaker dwellings and or accessory dwelling units, it's still the same amount of work for us. We still have to look at the same things. So you either make it one or the other, or both. But if it's both, or it's an or and an and.
Councillor Gourlay?
Okay, so on one hand, I do want to have a longer term discussion about tiny houses as accessory dwelling units, because I think that the standards that they're built to today and that the maturity that the industry has reached warrants that kind of discussion, and the urgency of the housing crisis warrants that kind of discussion. But that's probably a longer conversation. For now, I'm happy to just keep it caretaker dwelling unit. And we'll cut out ADU.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gourlay. Okay. Do we need a seconder for that one? Or you just, like, we don't need to amend it, right? Or, like, so a bit messy now. Okay, Councillor McKay says she'll second it as amended. As amended? Okay. Okay, maybe I'll get the corporate officer to read that back just so that, sorry, it is, well, I'm not gonna pass. There's no way.
Okay, that the committee recommend that council directs staff to bring forward a report to a future committee of the whole meeting on the viability of permitting tiny house RVs as caretaker dwelling units in Ladysmith.
Thank you so much. Okay, call the question. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, I believe that's it. No new business. That was the new business. So just call for adjournment. Moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Stevens. All in favor? Do we even? Okay.